CSS Flexbox, it's an important setting and it's a very fun one. So in CSS Flexbox layout, you are able to control how items placed inside a particular container can behave. For example, if you have a div and there are going to be certain items like other divs or other elements placed inside that div, you can always control how those items will flow in different scenarios of screen width available. So for example, over here, I've created this master div, which is a parent div, and it has a class set to it called flex container. And inside of it, we have six divs, which are its children, and each one of them has a class set to it known as item. And as you can see, I've set some padding to each and every item, so the text placed inside it doesn't appear completely cramped up and has some white space around it. There's a background color given to it, which is beige, and some margin so that these divs are a little apart from each other. And you can also see that the container, that is a flex container, the parent div, also has a bluish color set to it in the background and has set a property node display flex. Now, due to the property display flex, you can also observe one more thing that is, despite of these being divs, they are placed next to each other with a finite width. If you remember, divs are block level elements and they consume 100% of the screen space. In this case, that is not happening. Automatically, these appear as if they were an inline element because they have been placed inside a container that is a parent which is having display property flex set to it. Now, by default, this has a behavior of its own. We are going to look at it by manipulating the size of our screen. Now, I could do that by changing the size of my window, which I'm going to avoid doing. Therefore, I've accessed this developer panel, the developer tools in your browser, and you could go to this option known as toggle device emulation, which allows us to switch between several device screen sizes to check how your web page looks like on different web sizes. For now, I've chosen the responsive mode so I can control the width actively. And as you can see, the moment I start shrinking this, it keeps shrinking till a certain point, after which it breaks. That is, the content starts overflowing the background, meaning the actual size of the document is how much this color, bluish color set in the background is, and the rest all is just overflowing content. Now, to manage this, which is looking ugly, we have a simple method. In display flexbox, we can also set how a content can be wrapped. So let's say I'm setting a flex wrap property and setting the default value as wrap. As you can see, the moment I start shrinking my page, where the width is not available, items start moving to the next line, one at a time, unless and until, of course, the available space is less or more. So as I start shrinking, you see it moves down one at a time where it is capable of displaying certain items in a row. Now it's able to display three items as I shrink further, two, and then one. And of course, we don't have any screens which are any lower than this resolution, which also means you have to be very careful about the size of the items that you create is not less than or more than the minimum size of the least size of a screen. All right. So this is known as flex wrapping, and you can see every item is moved to the next available line. That is the suffix line. Now, if I change this property to flex reverse, let's see what happens as I shrink the screen size. Instead of moving it to the next line, these items are moved to the line above, that is the prepending line. This is also an interesting behavior and it can be controlled in amazing ways. You can use these to design layouts which respond to the screen sizes or maybe the orientation of your screen which changes. You can handle things accordingly. This is Flex Wrap. Let's check out other properties of Flex now. Now, apart from wrapping your content inside a Flex container, you can also play with the direction of the flow of the content. Now we are used to having a row-wise flow, that is every element that is added onto a document. If it is an inline element, it basically goes from left to right in a natural way, and it goes from one item next to the other on the same row, unless and until there is no more space available, it shifts on to the next row available. But let's say we want to control this behavior and we want all our items to appear right after the other, that is on the next line by default. For this, we have a setting known as flex direction. When you apply flex direction and but if you set row, you won't see any difference happening over here because row is the very natural way of doing things. That is the most default functionality. If I set it to column and you can see immediately we have a column wise spread out. So the column wise spread out basically just puts items one after the other because the direction of flow is column. Similarly, you can also use column reverse. What column reverse does is it puts the last item on the top. So it behaves more like a stack, wherein the first item to go in is the bottom and the last item to go in is on the top. This is what using flex direction column reverse does. Now, let's say if we set some finite height to our container. If I set a finite height to a container, let's say I give it a height of 500, so let's say 500 pixels. Immediately, the pixel height, because of the remaining height being less, it has moved the topmost item to the left. That is in the next column. Instead of moving it to the next line, that is next row, it has moved it to the next column that is available, that is immediately to the left side. That is how it works. Now, to simulate how this works, I'm going to attempt setting a height which is about 100 VH, which is about the vertical space available. This allows me to control the height space again, and as you can see, I am able to also control how these items are displayed, whether to be displayed on one fixed row or should I display them on separate columns. This is not quite oftenly used, but yeah, you will see certain layouts on blog pages or article-based pages like news websites where contents are delivered in different columns, and these columns move vertically, and once the height is consumed, they move to the next column. That's how it works, and this is how it can be set. Let's take a look at one more exciting feature in Flexbox, which is align items. Now, let's say we created this Flex container and there are items inside of it, and we have set a display property Flex. Now, wonderful feature inside this is if I set a height to the parent div, it is automatically going to be consumed by all the items that is children inside it. Meaning, it is always assured that all your divs, regardless of the size of content inside of them, are going to align perfectly in the heights no matter less, although it is going to align as per the parent's height. So this is something which is played around when displaying more than one item in one row on several websites where you have certain columns displayed in one particular row. Now, to avoid this, this could be a feature that can be used, but there is also one more item where you can set the alignment of items. Now, this is basically align items center, which is vertical alignment. The vertical alignment of all our items is going to be in the center. When you do that, it stops taking up the entire height of its parent and it only consumes the amount of height that is required to display content inside of it. Now, similar to vertical alignment, we also need to have something which can help us horizontally align our content. As you can see, the content, when more width is available, appears to be starting from the left and it is left aligned by default. So one simple way of doing this is using justify content. And by using justify content, I can simply center all the content that I have. Please remember, justify content is only for horizontal centering, not vertical. For vertically centering your items, you need to use align items center. So those of you who are wondering how those little login box are created on several websites, where the background is simple or some image and there is a little box in the center which contains your login. Yes, the parent of that box is set to display flex and it has align item center and justify content as center. It's as simple as that. No more struggling with creating a div centered on your screen. Now, to quickly understand more settings that are available to a flex box, we can simply go to our DevTools panel and access the element and inspector. A simpler way of doing this is you can just go right click on the container that we have. In this case, I'm going to right click on this area of blue, right click, and then I'm going to click on inspect. As you can see, the DevTools panel, the inspector is highlighted over here with the exact container or the element that I selected, and it has shown me that the class name is set to so and so, that is Flex container, and all its settings are available right here. Now, if I move my mouse over this, it highlights which of these elements is responsible for to be rendered on the screen, and that render is selected, as you can see. Now, when I've selected a container, I'm going to access this property that is display flex. And right next to it, there is a Flexbox editor. Yes, this is a very simple and beautiful setting provided by modern web browsers. Every web browser which is based on the Chromium project, so be it Google Chrome, Firefox, Opera, or your Microsoft Edge, all of these provide a support for this. Once you click on the Flexbox editor, it shows you certain options that can be played around with. So the first one, which is flex direction, and we already saw what happens when a flex direction is changed. And you can have column reversed, you can have row reversed, or you can have it unselected. And the moment you select a particular option, the particular CSS setting is applied down below on this particular area. Now, to make it more visible, I'm going to drag this a little. Yes. So once this box is available, I can see what is added more. Similarly, you have wrap, no wrap, and these are the most commonly understood. Let's check out the other ones that we have. Align content is more visible when we set a finite height to it, which we will do in a second. But before that, let's see align content, justify content. Right now, there is no content justification set. And if I set it to center, let's see what happens. So center brings all our items to center or it is left aligned. That is, by default, it is set to content start, which is this. If I set to content flex start basically begins aligning the content from the starting point of it. So if your content is set to be in reverse order, let's say we have a reverse row over here, automatically flex start is going to set it from the right side instead of the left side. So remember, flex start is not exactly always going to be left or right. It totally depends upon the direction of the flow of your content. Similarly, if you have set it to column-based view and you select flex start or flex end, it is not going to make any difference as such because it is consuming the height instead of the width. So justify content is more about aligning content in the available height space, which in this case is not very much visible. So let's say I choose flex end. When I flex end property is applied, it gets populated in such a way that it's sticking to the right side or the end part of the render. Again, needless to say, if I set it to reverse row order, it is going to definitely have a flex end, which looks like flex start. It might sound a little confusing, but you need to practice to get the hang of it. So let's say instead of setting the justify content, I look at align items, which is again a vertical setting. So how about we play with the vertical spacing by setting a height to our container? And let's this height be, say, about 600 pixels. So 600 pixels it is, and you can see our items have taken up the entire height that is available to them. Oh, instead of pixels, I've chosen PC. My bad. So 600 pixels is what has been taken up over here. We can play around with that by clicking on display flex again. First of all, align content center. The moment I do that, all the content is center aligned vertically. And yes, it is also made to have a height that is only required for it by its content. Or if it has any default height set to it, it will consume that height. Next is justify content. I can also set it to center. So justify content continues to working even if you have a finite height. Similarly, you have align items, which will work seamlessly again because we have not set anything else. Now, align items also does the same job as align content, but remember, always play around with the setting that you need.